having this fight, why it is that we're having this discussion is completely and totally stupid. I mean, it really and truly is. We kind of sort of need to move on from all this, but makes you wonder if there's not an agenda at play. But we're going to be talking about this, asking questions, seeing exactly how far you can go when it comes to your brother, your ally, before they're not really and truly your ally. Just that type of stuff there. So make sure you guys stick around.
Society, you don't have an answer. So it must be a conspiracy. There must be some sort, and you're just asking questions. You don't know, right? This is the game that is played by so many corrupt commentators, just asking questions. I don't have to show you evidence that something terrible is happening. I don't have to actually demonstrate how the thing is happening. I don't have to tell you who the problem is.
Right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, well, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great savings life. No, it's wrong to drop nuclear.
I find it fascinating that many conservatives are now lambasting Tucker Carlson for asking certain hard questions about narratives we've been fed by the government. Do I agree with Tucker on all of his views? Of course not. I don't agree with anybody on 100% of their views.
And I guess you guys can just call this right here the gift that keeps on giving. And what I mean by the gift that keeps on giving is the fact that regardless of what one person says, another person is going to criticize it. And of course, that person that's going to criticize it is going to automatically go in some form of territory that I've warned a lot of people for a very long time he was already in. Now, before we get started, I'm going to take a second and go ahead and kind of tell you guys before we get to the point of this video, which, by the way, you guys obviously saw the title and the thumbnail, which, by the way, is what we're going to be discussing and obviously the title of this video. I want you to know something right now, that you can disagree with your brother, you can disagree with your friends, you can disagree with your ally, and still have a good old-fashioned working relationship. However, once again, it's also about perspectives. I'm just glad that a third party finally stepped in here and said exactly what the hell needed to be said, and that right there was obviously Vivek Ramaswammy. Now, whether one side of the aisle, that right there being Shapiro, will actually take heed, I don't think will actually happen because, as I've told you guys before, this is, kind of how he is. And I'm a guy who agrees with Ben about 95% of the time when it comes to the issues. I actually agree with him a lot more than I do Tucker Carlson, but still at the same time, though, I prefer Tucker Carlson as an actual human being. But still, though, we got a lot to discuss. We got a lot to talk about in a video that I originally wanted to try to get out on Tuesday, but seeing how I got some time to actually record it, I'm going to try to get it out tonight. So make sure you guys stick around for the full video, and let's discuss exactly how much you can and cannot disagree with when it comes to your actual brother. Let's get into it.
Society, you don't have an answer. So it must be a conspiracy. There must be some sort, and you're just asking questions. You don't know, right? This is the game that is played by so many corrupt commentators, just asking questions. I don't have to show you evidence that something terrible is happening. I don't have to actually demonstrate how the thing is happening. I don't have to tell you who the problem is. Wink, wink. But I can just tell you right now that there is a problem. But even, and if I'm asked about it, hey, I'm just asking questions. Now, let me tell you something about just asking questions for a second. Just asking questions is a game for children. My son is 7. He can just ask questions. My daughter is 10. She can just ask questions. If you are 50 and you are just asking questions, I don't think you're just asking questions. I think that your level of curiosity is actually quite low. I think that you don't care enough to know or know enough to care. I think that the vast majority of people who are in the just asking questions business have an answer that they want to suggest, but they know there's no evidence for it, so instead they hide behind just asking questions. In other words, they're completely
The two videos that I did on that topic, the one that I did here on John Claymore was more of a reaction to what Tucker said, but it was also my honest thoughts on the second thing that Tucker Carlson talked about, which, by the way, was the topic of UFOs. I'll link the video in the description box. I disagree with him on one topic, and of course, on the other topic, I also, for the most part, did agree with him on. Just goes to show you that you can disagree with your brother on one thing, and you can also agree with your brother on another, or your ally, or your friend, or whoever it is that you watch, and still be a sane, rational human being. Of course, in the world of Shapiro, that does not exactly exist. And of course, in my big video that I did on Gear Issue 33, which will also be linked in the description box, I explained the justification of why it was that the United States was correct for doing what they did at the end of World War II. I explained all that then. Not going to go into it now, but I will link the videos into the comment section and the description box for you guys to see. Now, moving on. The point is this right here. The whole topic of asking questions and conspiracies and things like that there, I don't think that asking questions ever stops. That's obviously going to happen. I've told you guys before, two main things that, quite frankly, I don't believe. I don't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald did Kennedy. There's way too much forensic evidence to explain why in the world he did not do it, not to mention the fact you've got that great big giant Texas live oak in his way, obstructing his view from actually being able to put the president down, which, by the way, at the exact same time, there's a lot of things, and I've been to the actual book depository before. It's actually a pretty daggone small place. There's a lot of things that kind of go against the lone shooter, and of course, I've also told you that I don't believe Kurt Cobain committed suicide. Okay, I understand I probably wasn't supposed to say that in this video because of YouTube's terms of standard, terms of service, but still at the same time, I think we can get away with a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of leave it in here anyways and see what happens. The point is this right here. There are obviously things that we're going to question, and a lot of people raise kids, have families, well-adjusted people, question things. Nothing wrong with that at all. We're all allowed to question things. So I think that Ben's take there is a little bit, let's just say, shut the hell up, do as I say, do as I do. It makes him look a little bit more on the authoritarian side. All right, and given the current situation around the world, which I actually agree more with Ben on than Tucker, I think that given takes like this.
Who has a brain and knows history has always wondered if a country that is not a Jewish state is going to eternally provide them security guarantees and full citizenship. Of course, I mean that's I think to think that that's why the existence of the state of Israel is the single greatest guarantor of my loyalty to the United States.
You might want to look in the mirror. By the way, I've told you guys my position. Just put a carrier group out there. Don't allow any of the third parties to get involved, and we should be good to go. But moving on. The thing about these particular discussions, these thing about these types of criticisms, as vehement as they are, I want you to think about this phrase. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, okay? How you say something is going to be exactly how it is that you look. But there are some things that Ben did say in his exchange with Tucker Carlson where he did have a good point, and he was obviously correct to question. For example, this first bit here. And by the way, I want you guys to know right now that over the course of this little series that we're going to be interrupting, there are things in here that, quite frankly, do make Ben look a lot worse when we have this conversation. But there are things, by the way, that, quite frankly, do make him look good. You just have to pay attention to the details of how it is that he speaks, and you'll figure out exactly where he really and truly is. Let's roll this first part.
That has now risen on the right, that there is something deeply malign about the United States, something deeply wrong with the United States. This was made apparent over the weekend. Tucker Carlson was on Joe Rogan's show. Obviously, I'm very friendly with Joe. I think Joe does a great job during his interviews. And there was a clip from this interview that went particularly viral. This is a clip in which Tucker Carlson calls the United States evil for having dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, ending World War II, and then suggests that anyone who would justify that is also evil, which is a very traditionally left-wing perspective. It is not traditionally a particularly right-wing perspective because most people on the conservative side of the aisle tend to believe that America is a force for good in the world. And as we'll discuss, it turns out that dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was necessary for ending World War II and likely saved millions of lives, both American and Japanese. So when it comes to the moral calculus of leaders killing people, that's the realm of normal politics. So, for example, he will downplay Vladimir Putin's evil in killing his political opponents and invading sovereign countries and killing civilian populations in those sovereign countries by basically saying all leaders kill people. But when it comes to ending World War II by dropping the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which did bring an end to the war, that is a moral stain, a moral blight that America simply...
I think I need to go over moral stain and moral blight because I think we deal with moral stain and moral blight, crap slinging all the time from the other side of the aisle. If you think that Tucker's trying to, if you think that Ben's trying to maybe marry Tucker with that side of the aisle, that right there is something that will probably come up in a video a little bit later on this week. Lauren Chen kind of did a video on it called The Woke Right, and now you got this guy from Trigonometry running his mouth too. I think that right is a little bit more complex, so I'm not going to get into it for the purpose of this video here, but what I will say is that obviously the blood guilt that the United States of America has to constantly go through from when it comes to the actual grievous parties. I haven't seen Tucker Carlson actually push that narrative. However, there are a lot of people who are starting to pick up on that, but I need to go back and actually look through it with a fine-tooth comb before I can come up with an actual true, honest-to-God judgment on that. However, there is definitely a purity spiral that goes on every single election year, and quite frankly, we are living in a time where things are getting exposed. But there will be a special video on that particular topic a little bit later on. Let's get back to the point. Okay, Ben's got some very valid points there. Of course, the whole topic of bombing Japan came back up again, and I did a video on this, 2 videos, like I mentioned earlier, explaining why it is that I felt that Tucker Carlson was wrong with that take. And I also explained why it was that nuclear missiles is quite frankly something we're probably just going to get used to. And also, even though I know that's not a popular take, I want you to understand something right now. You live in a country that has the most powerful military in the world. I got to break this down before we go any further. When people talk about nuclear missile defense, I have to tell them all the time, like I said in a recent video that was about the Iron Dome situation. Well, not the Iron Dome situation, but a guy was asking the question why it was the United States to not have an Iron Dome. And I thought to myself, you really and truly don't know nothing, do you? Now, I'm not saying this, pointing this at my audience. I'm talking about the individual I was discussing. We do have an Iron Dome. It's called the United States Air Force. It's called the United States Navy. We have a lot of planes right here on the East Coast, the West Coast, all over the country, and that right there is what we use as our deterrent against nuclear missiles. They're interceptors, okay? And no other country in the world has an Air Force or an Air Corps like we do, especially as advanced. No matter how much China or Iran or anybody says that they are, you live in the most powerful nation in the world when it comes to overall military supremacy. As far as nukes is concerned, well, let me ask you a question. Would you be okay if we got rid of our nukes, but yet Russia and China and North Korea and Iran and all those other countries were allowed to keep theirs? I mean, it's the same people who chant death to America every day, but you're okay with them having a weapon, but not us. I don't know Tucker Carlson's position on the Middle East as far as that's concerned, but still at the same time, though, it's an issue where I got to disagree with him at. We got to have those nukes, okay? Mutually assured destruction is also mutually assured survival. Just figured I'd point that out. However, when it comes to the topic of hypocrisy, let me just go ahead and point this out to kind of counter Ben's point. I remember when the poke was a big thing. And of course, now you got people going after former President Trump because he likes to brag about Operation Warp Speed. And by the way, there are problems with that. I never got the jab. Okay. And I was very, very much against the jab when it came out. Give it some time, let it develop. But here I am, once again, a Trump voter disagreeing with him on that. Another thing I disagree with former President Trump on is the fact that he recently, in a Fox News town hall, came out and said that Russia won World War II. I vehemently disagree with that take. There are a lot of things wrong with that particular take, which, by the way, will be a video essay at a later date. But I'm still voting for the guy because I understand that the country was better off when he was president. That little tangent is over with. Now let me get back to the point. The point is this right here. Ben Shapiro pushed that poke. He pushed that vaccine on the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh pushed it. They all pushed it until Candace Owens suddenly had an issue. I think you might want to look in the mirror. Now, there is one thing, though, that does need to be said about Tucker's interview with Putin. I watched it roughly the day after the interview came out. I found it very odd that Tucker would then turn right back around and go to a Russian grocery store and try to tell us that inflation was fake, when obviously we're dealing with it here, and obviously in Russia, a country that, quite frankly, its economy is about the size of New York State, and they haven't even really truly leaned into their full potential, but still, people are poor and broke there. Why it was that you would go over there and you would praise that. I understand what he was trying to do, but at the same time, though, you need to look at the overall quality of the product that you're buying while you're over there. Something else, too, that Tucker Carlson did, and this is obviously a criticism of him, is the fact that he decided he wanted to talk about the Moscow railway system and the actual subway tunnels. What Tucker will not tell you is that these trains, as good as they look or whatnot, they operate like pure crap. So there's definitely a lot more that you could criticize from Tucker Carlson's trip when it comes to Russia, but once again, here we are.
It has been corrupted by. So here he was talking about Vladimir Putin killing people. Again, this is just a couple of months ago.
You should challenge some ideas. For instance, you didn't talk about freedom of speech in Russia. You did not talk about Navalny, about assassinations, about the restrictions on opposition in the coming elections.
I didn't talk about the things that every other American media outlet talks about.
Why? Yes, this
because
is my
those
question.
are covered, and because I have spent my life talking to people who run countries in various countries and have concluded the following. That every leader kills people, including my leader. Every leader kills people. Some kill more than others. Leadership requires killing people. Sorry. That's why I wouldn't want to be a leader.
That one right there is roughly about 30 some odd seconds. You guys saw that, and you guys saw exactly how Tucker was approached when it comes to the interview with Putin. Let me give you my feelings on Putin. And I've got to give this feeling again and again and again. I don't like him. I never have liked him. Never really and truly cared for him. I thought the interview that Tucker did with Putin was actually quite lax. I really and truly did. It was a solid interview, yes, but I also remember how the media chose to go after Tucker Carlson for interviewing Vladimir Putin when it came to 2 hours. And like I said, sorry, it's going to sound a little bit hypocritical, but bear with me. But yet they did not attack Oliver Stone for spending an entire week in Russia and basically having his lips sewn to Vladimir Putin's behind. There were some tough questions there, yeah, but Putin seemed to have an actual answer for it. He's still our enemy. I would like to have Putin be somebody we can work with against radical Islam and against China. The goal would be to get Russia to work for us, but of course, Vladimir Putin is ex-KGB, and quite frankly, he can never be trusted. Simple as that. But still, at the same time, though, I'm not looking to poke the bear any more than, quite frankly, we need to. The situation in Ukraine, I'm looking at that and saying, you know, if you just simply let Ukraine and Russia hash this thing out, Russia's military would be down about a third, and you wouldn't have to worry about them. Stop sending money to Ukraine. They would have probably had problems with Ukraine anyways going in there. The only thing you're doing right now is draining the freaking taxpayer. And of course, you're draining every other resource in this country. Makes you wonder what the hell is really and truly being done with all this money being sent to Ukraine. But moving on. Once again, Ben has the points. But once again, like I've also got to say, the mask has slipped off of Ben, and he's definitely a lot more pro-establishment at this moment in time, and very much more on the establishment narrative. Now, here's the one that really is kind of like Ben shows you who he really and truly is moment.
Because that's very blasé about leaders killing people. But when it comes to ending World War II, then all of a sudden the United States bears the stain of a giant blood guilt that can never be alleviated. Or if it can be, he has not really spelled out. So this isn't actually America First, ironically. This is actually kind of fascinating. It's something else. So the America First movement, right, which is the isolationist movement that was very well-trafficked and very popular in 1939, 1940, before it took a late turn into overt anti-Semitism. He's saying that America is and has historically been a nefarious force in foreign policy, which is actually a left-wing argument from the 1960s, that America bears blood guilt. In fact, it sounds a lot more like radical protesters on today's college campuses than like a traditional conservative. You hear that when Russell Brand says to him. It sounds like what you are saying about Hiroshima and Nagasaki is what the left is saying about the history of race in the United States, that America bears blood guilt, that America is in its essence guilty and corrupt.
Once again, good point about blood guilt, and good point about laissez attitudes when it comes to certain people. But still, at the same time, though, Ben, you then decide to go back into the whole MAGA as anti-Semitic. Now, Ben's going to try to explain to you what America First really and truly is, and then I'm going to come right back around the other side and fully destroy what he's about to say as far as America First is concerned. And by the way, I'm not really and truly full-blown MAGA. I'm just a good old-fashioned traditional conservative who is, for the most part, moderately conservative when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, which, by the way, is what the hell MAGA really and truly is, for the most part. We got tired of seeing our tax dollars going overseas to pay for wars that, quite frankly, we should not be involved in. However, America First never really and truly meant become an isolationist faction. And oh, by the way, when he talked about anti-Semitism and threw that around in the late 1930s and 1940s, what happened is exactly what I'm going to be telling you guys on the other side. But I'm also going to be linking the video from Mark Dice in the description box to kind of help further that as well, because I'm just here to give you one aspect where he's got multiple aspects, one of which, by the way, he didn't cover, but I'm going to kind of fill in for you guys. But the other thing I need you guys to kind of look at and kind of consider when it comes to Ben and Ben's argument is that this is the same guy who, for whatever reason, chose to label Ron Paul, of all people, as anti-Semitic because he thought that we should reduce our overall spending to nations in the Middle East. Ron Paul was about as left-wing as it came when it come to U.S. foreign policy, but he was also pretty well conservative and right-wing when it come to overall economics, and he was a true libertarian for the most part. Ron Paul was not anti-Semitic. Ron Paul was not alt-right. Ron Paul was just a basic libertarian, okay? And I have my disagreements with Ron Paul too, but I would definitely prefer him to what the hell's running the country now. Let's continue. I think that Ben Shapiro may be going too far with that. Yes, there are things, like I said before, that I do disagree with Tucker Carlson on. But I don't think that Tucker Carlson believes that the United States is a nefarious force or wholly evil. I think that what Tucker Carlson's talking about is acts that he thought were evil. Like, for example, Tucker Carlson is obviously much, much more conservative when it comes to social issues here in the United States, which, by the way, kind of goes to the whole America First thing. And by the way, I think that there's some takes that Tucker Carlson has that I, quite frankly, don't agree with. I've also seen him get completely smashed between segments between him and Sean Hannity. Somebody who, quite frankly, has been kind of tossed under the bus over the years, but then again, at the same time, if your roots are more neoconservative, you're probably going to get smashed for it, especially in today's day and age. The truth about Tucker Carlson is Tucker Carlson is what you call a social conservative. Tucker Carlson probably wants a strong military, but it probably doesn't want our military to spread the hell out unless the war is justified. I can't think of a single war that Ben Shapiro was not in favor of, okay? And I know this is a guy who's a veteran who did serve and did do 2 tours in Iraq, and I get crap all the time from people saying, you didn't follow WMD. Shut the fuck up. The point is this right here. What Tucker Carlson is basically saying is, I don't want to send my kids to go fight for somebody else, and he notices that that little segment is also on the right as well. But still, though, at the same time, though, getting back to the whole segment about Japan or bombing Japan, like I said, I did 2 videos on that already, explaining why it was that we were justified. And if anything, we were actually not just saving American lives, we were also saving Japanese lives and Russian lives. By the way, come Russia, people forget how World War II ended for Russia. These people who keep on saying that Russia won World War II. I think you guys have got conflated post-World War II versus the actual war itself. That right there is the biggest problem that I have. Russia won the post-World War II aspect because they got pretty much all half of Europe. But people also forget that during the war, they lost a lot of men, they lost a lot of people, and of course that military that they had probably would have been drug out much, much further, speaking of the actual war and the loss of life, if the United States had not hit Normandy, if the United States had not hit Italy, which, by the way, prompted Hitler to pull all of his tigers out when it came to the Battle of Kursk. A lot of very, very bad takes going around. But I did tell you guys that I was going to very, very briefly explain what America First really and truly is. And here it is. America First, for the most part, is realizing that American people need to be put first. You can have allies. We have an ally in the Middle East. That nation is Israel, okay? And now Jordan is starting to work because of Trump's foreign policy and the Abraham Accords. And then, you've got Saudi Arabia. People are starting to come on board, opening up the airspace so that way Israel can defend themselves against drone strikes. Putting no troops on the ground, for example, but keeping a carrier there. That right there is more common sense than anything else. Basically, the whole point behind America First is stop just giving our money to anybody and everybody in the world. You look at the 90s, you look at NAFTA, you look at all the jobs that got shipped overseas. And, of course, Shapiro's not going to mention that bullshit, okay? He's not going to mention that at all. This is the same guy who also said that Nikki Haley was a spirit animal. America First is simply putting the American people first, okay? It's not anti-Semitic or anything. There are people out there who are anti-Israel, but not anti-Semitic. I do believe that there is a difference, which, by the way, we'll probably explain at a later date. But then again, YouTube's terms of services could actually hit this video just for me saying that. But, of course, I don't believe in lying to you guys. I believe in telling you the actual truth. But thank God somebody decided to step in and actually try to provide some form of rationality to this. Now, you guys obviously saw, let's just go ahead and re-roll it.
I find it fascinating that many conservatives are now lambasting Tucker Carlson for asking certain hard questions about narratives we've been fed by the government. Do I agree with Tucker on all of his views? Of course not. I don't agree with anybody on 100% of their views. That would be a weird thing to do. But I also think it's a weird thing to do to lambast somebody for questioning certain narratives when, in fact, that's what it means to be a skeptical citizen of a truly democratic nation.
It's one of the reasons why it is that a lot of people believe that what's really going on is that one section of conservative media is trying to out Tucker Carlson as a non-conservative. There are some takes, and I did talk about that in the previous one. Of course, you had Gerald A., and I'll try to link the Crowder bit segment in the description box. When this conversation came up, it was him, it was Crowder. They were having a discussion about nuking Japan. And Crowder, of course, he had the receipts of why the United States was justified. Gerald A., on the other hand, he went on this massive rant basically saying that Tucker Carlson had fully crossed into climate change territory. I'm just saying some people are obviously going to view it a different way, but I don't think we've gotten there yet, which, by the way, is going to be very much a premise when it comes to the video that's going to be on the woke right itself. But trust me, that video will probably be out a little bit later on this week. I just want to respond to this one right here. But I think that Ramaswamy basically says exactly what most people in the room are kind of already thinking. But let's watch some more.
For questioning certain narratives, when in fact that's what it means to be a skeptical citizen of a truly democratic nation. I'll tell you where it comes from, though. I'm not just going to tar somebody on the other side. Let's get to the heart of what's going on there. I think we as conservatives have appropriately been fed up by the self-loathing left that has repeatedly for 160 years and for the last 6 years incessantly questioned the founding of our country, obsessing over systemic racism and white rage and the original sin of slavery at our founding. And at a certain point, all of us, most conservatives I know, myself included, Tucker included, others, are saying enough with it already. Let's move forward as one country because we've beaten that dead horse to death. There's nothing more to say. Now, back in 1960, when you didn't have necessarily equal rights enjoyed across this country, that was still a relevant conversation to have, to say, well, slavery existed all the way through the Civil War. The Reconstruction era didn't quite put an end to those inequities. How are we going to deal with it in the Civil Rights Revolution? That was a reasonable discussion to have. But now we're 60 plus years after that, and at a certain point...
It's like I got to tell the woke left all the time, you know, the Civil Rights Act, that was signed in the 1960s, even though I could be against or whatever, or rework the bill or whatever the hell you want to do. The fact is this right here, we're over it. We've been over this type of crap. Okay, we're done with it. I mean, we really and truly are. I mean, if you want to go back and relive it, just go back and look at the History Channel documentaries, and you can go on YouTube. The fact of the matter is this right here. We're not living in that age anymore. We're living in a brand new age. And people have obviously advanced. We need you to move the hell on. It makes certain people think that maybe there is a woke cult on the right itself. And some people are trying to say that it's actually Tucker is the one who is. But in reality, if you really and truly sit back and think about it, I think what they're trying to do is they're really trying to out him as an actual ardent leftist is what they're trying to do. A leftist in disguise. It could play into the whole Tucker's a Russian bot, Russian agent thing. Of course, they already tried this with former President Trump. But of course, this is kind of the thing to do. I also remember when Trump first got into office, Shapiro never really and truly fought back against the mainstream media's claims that Trump was owned by Putin. Just throwing that out there. And obviously, we would find out later on that there was no Russia collusion. I mean, we heard that Russia crap for a long time. Look, what you need to do is you need to be able to blunt it. You need to be able to debunk it. You need to be able to go ahead and just kind of put it to bed. You need to just go ahead and kind of prove these people wrong and just move the hell on. The faster you move the hell on, which, by the way, is exactly what the woke left does not want you to do. They want you to stand there and continue to entertain their pity parties. The sooner you can just kind of like figure it out and just kind of move on, the better off your life will be. But let's watch this last part.
To move on. And if you're consistently still obsessing over narratives dating back over 250 years, then yes, that means you probably do in some measure hate this country. Fine. But that's different from saying that there are certain areas where we deserve to question our own history that haven't been questioned. And I think that that's the difference we need to draw. The distinction we need to draw is one thing to beat a dead horse and hate ourselves for the sake of hating ourselves. That's what the modern left does. But that's not what Tucker's doing. To the contrary, he's turning over rocks that haven't really been turned over, rolling over logs that deserve to be rolled over and seeing what crawls out. Sometimes maybe there's nothing there. Is he going to have a 100% hit rate? Of course not. But I don't think it's the right thing to do, especially as conservatives who are supposed to be skeptical of the government, to criticize somebody for asking questions, and not just in an armchair way, but in a rigorous way, asking the kinds of questions that at least the American people deserve to have answers to and closure on. I think that's a good thing. And whether you're liberal or conservative, I think you actually do love this country if you're willing to ask those hard questions. And that's why I think it's a mistake, an unintentional mistake that many conservatives make when they try to tell people to shut up, sit down, and do as they're told. That's what the modern progressive left does. Let's not make the same mistake.
Pretty much what everybody in the room is saying and thinking at this moment in time. You know, look, you can have a conversation with your brother. You can have a conversation with people that you disagree with, and you be just fine. Okay, it's the extreme woke loons out there on the other side that you can't have a conversation with, and the bad actors that are here on this thing we call YouTube and online who constantly, which we'll do a video on debate at a later date, and I'll also give you guys my personal feeling on that. If you can have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you, sane and rational, even if they're somewhat loony and don't agree with you, even if they don't vote the same way you do, obviously, okay, that way needs to be done, and of course, obviously, to have a conversation to kick up some ideas. Nowadays, though, we're not having debate for ideas. We're having debate for optics. And quite frankly, it's mind-numbing. It's boring. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody wants to watch. And the only thing it does is just prey on people's emotions. This right here is a situation where it is that one guy said something that somebody disagrees with, and now the other person or the person who disagrees with it is obviously getting pissed off and getting upset with the fact that somebody is obviously asking questions. There ain't nothing wrong with asking questions at all. Okay? Nothing wrong with that at all. And I haven't seen enough evidence that proves to me that Tucker Carlson is anything more than a paleo-conservative who probably does have some left-leaning views, but I don't think that they're left-leaning views outside the actual norm. Typically, people on the left typically tend to be the most anti-war, but of course the new left is very, very pro-war for whatever reason. I mean, they're not going to kill him. They're not going to, I'm not going to get started. The point is this right here. We can have these discussions. We can have this conversation. There's things I disagree with Ramaswamy about, but obviously Ramaswamy came in here and said, look, there's certain things that's happened that quite frankly, you just need to move the hell on from. I think that was the best take. And it's not like Tucker Carlson just has a bunch of woke left loons on his show. He has had Jimmy Dore. He has had some lefties on his show. But for the most part, Tucker Carlson just interviews everybody. And if Ben Shapiro remembers Tucker Carlson remembering art and Satanists on his show, then quite frankly, he would not be as alarmed by what Tucker is saying. Tucker Carlson is a guy who ultimately at the end of the day has a conversation with everybody. That's just kind of who he is. So I don't really see a problem there. So, yes, you should be allowed to ask questions, and Ben is absolutely 100% wrong about people asking questions. This is also the same person who said once you retire, you'll be dead in 5 years because, quite frankly, you don't serve a purpose anymore and wants you to continue to work for $13 an hour until you're 75 years old. Just figure I'd point that. This is also the same guy who, by the way, said that having small children was not expensive. Done a video on that one already. Very, very smug person Ben is, and we're starting to see more and more and more about it. It just makes you wonder exactly how long this spot will actually last. But you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. I'm going to try to get this video out on Monday evening. Apparently, the grounds crew, they must have taken the day off, or maybe they ain't coming into the afternoon. But please, make sure you guys please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please share the video. If it's not out on Monday evening, it will be out Tuesday around lunchtime. Still, though, please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign off in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.